This episode is brought to you by my Fertility Awareness Mastery online self-study program. Learn fertility awareness from the comfort of your own home at your own pace for a fraction of the cost. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/mastery for details. That's fertilityfriday.com/mastery. This episode is brought to you by my very first book, The Fifth Vital Sign: Master Your Cycles and Optimize Your Fertility. With over 1,000 research citations, it is the most comprehensive resource on fertility awareness and the menstrual cycle to date. The Fifth Vital Sign is available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook formats on Amazon.com. Listen to The Fifth Vital Sign for free when you sign up for a 30-day trial with Audible. Visit fertilityfriday.com/audible for details. That's fertilityfriday.com/audible. This is a Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 267. Welcome to the 267th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. I'm excited to share today's episode with you. In today's episode, I'm sharing my interview with Wendy Myers, and I thought it would be a great episode to follow up last week's episode with Dr. Erica Enos. In last week's episode, in case you didn't catch it, we talked all about detoxification, and I feel like we really shattered some of the myths about detoxification, and Dr. Enos shared the 4 main avenues of detoxification and really kind of expanding what it means to detoxify, because we often think of detoxifying as doing something, doing a protocol, ingesting certain things and forcing our body to get rid of toxins, when there are several stages of detoxification, some of which simply involve reducing our toxin exposure, and that is an important first step that all of us can start doing at any time. And so in today's episode, we continue on this important discussion of detoxification, and Wendy shares some of the ways that toxin exposure can impact our hormones and our fertility as women. Even we touch on how it can affect our cycles, and so it's a really important episode just to really start that discussion of detoxification. And I would also direct you to one of my previous episodes with Dr. Joseph Pizzorno. So you'll find the link in the show notes page for this episode. When I actually met Dr. Pizzorno at a conference, and I interviewed him live, which was really fun because I don't often get an opportunity to do live interviews. I've only done a handful of live in-person interviews for the podcast. But, when I did the interview with Dr. Pizzorno, it was shortly after he did one of his presentations for the conference that I was attending a couple of years back. And really, his work is so crucial and focused on toxin exposure and how toxin exposure is related to illness. Many of the illnesses that we think are attributed to lifestyle factors and things like that, Dr. Pizzorno shows us a very specific link, and of course his work is heavily evidence-based and research-backed. So a lot of the conditions that we think about, for example, even say endometriosis, where that's a condition associated with inflammation, and there's discussion of it being an autoimmune condition. One of the common factors in endometriosis is toxin exposure, potentially even in utero, which is a topic that we discussed in the series that I did on black hair products in my interview with Dr. Tiffany Katz. So I'll have several links in the show notes page to different episodes that have focused on toxin exposure in a number of different ways. And it's really helpful to know that if you are charting your cycles, or if you're monitoring your menstrual cycles, if you're monitoring your fertile signs, and you start to embark on this journey of detoxification and cleaning up your chemical exposures, it's really helpful and comforting to know that as you track your cycles, you may start to see an improvement in some of the symptoms that you've experienced. For many women, when they embark on this journey, start, reducing toxin exposure, improving the diet, looking at lifestyle factors, and just generally moving towards healthier lifestyle choices, often we find that our menstrual cycles improve. And the interesting and wonderful thing about charting is it gives you a physical representation of this, whereas often without the charting, you kind of have a sense of it and you can pay attention to how you feel. But when you're charting your cycles, you actually have this physical record of how these changes have impacted you. And so if you are somewhere in your charting journey, whether you are just starting your charting journey or whether you've been charting your cycles for a while, whether you're thinking about using fertility awareness as your primary method of birth control, I have a number of different resources to support you in that process. And so first and foremost, my book, The Fifth Vital Sign, Master Your Cycles and Optimize Your Fertility. It's available on Amazon in ebook, paperback, and audio formats. If you are an audiobook lover like myself, then, and if you also haven't signed up for Audible, you can listen to The Fifth Vital Sign for free with your 30-day trial of Audible. And you'll find more details at fertilityfriday.com/audible. And if you're ready to really jump in and take the next step in your charting journey, you'll appreciate the self-study program that I've created for you, my Fertility Awareness Mastery online self-study program. This program is the most comprehensive fertility awareness self-study program available. With over 10 hours of video lessons, you can learn at your own pace in your living room for a fraction of the cost of joining one of my live coaching programs. Make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/mastery for additional details. That's fertilityfriday.com/mastery. Now, without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. And I'm really excited to welcome my guest, Wendy Myers, to the show. Now, I've known about Wendy and followed her work loosely for many, many years, and she's been podcasting for longer than I have, so it's really exciting to have her on the show. And so if you don't know Wendy, Wendy is the founder of MyersDetox.com. She is a detox expert and functional diagnostic nutritionist in Los Angeles, California. She is the #1 bestselling author of Limitless Energy, How to Detox Toxic Metals to End Exhaustion and Chronic Fatigue. And Wendy's podcast is Myers Detox. She is passionate about the importance of detox to live a long, disease-free life. She created the revolutionary Myers Detox Protocol after working with thousands of clients. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about heavy metals, how they affect hormones and fertility. And I'm just really excited to dive in. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Wendy.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. I'm really curious, before we get into the thick of everything, how did you get into the area of heavy metals in detox? Because honestly, I did mention that I've known about your work for a long time, and there's always a part of me that's like, wow, Wendy's still going, and you've been going strong for quite a while. And so I admire that about just your passion to spread this message.
Yeah, I love what I do. And I know for myself, my health issues were largely due to heavy metal toxicity and chemical toxicity. And when I address those issues, I feel amazing. Of course, you have to eat a good diet and sleep and exercise and whatnot. But, I was doing all that and doing a really good job eating an amazing diet and taking care of myself in every way. And I still felt like crap. And I just was really frustrated by that. And I know a lot of people are as well, when they feel like they're doing everything right and reading articles and taking all these expensive supplements and doing all this stuff, and people are still struggling. And what I learned and discovered in my own path and my own health journey, after I went to my doctor and did all this medical testing and found out I had the hormone levels of a menopausal woman at 37 and had low thyroid hormone function, and the doctor wanted to do hormone replacement and take thyroid pills. And this is a functional medical doctor. When I started detoxing and removing these roadblocks to my hormone production, then my health dramatically improved. And it didn't happen overnight. It takes time to remove these toxins from our body and start using different household cleaners that don't have chemicals that interfere in your hormones, and start taking different supplements that maximize detoxification, and start using different beauty products that don't interfere in our hormones. There's a lot of things lifestyle things you have to correct. But when I started detoxing my body, that's when the needle really moved for me. And in all this research I was doing, I decided I wanted to dedicate my life to this. And I started MyersDetox.com and started publishing everything I was learning and researching to help others, discover this and, metal detoxification, and add detox as that missing piece in their health puzzle.
Mm-hmm. Well, would you mind taking us a little bit into your story? Just if you wouldn't mind sharing with us some of the symptoms that you were having, because it sounds as though you were having these symptoms and then you were obviously doing the diet piece and a lot of the lifestyle piece, but it wasn't changing. So I'm curious about what some of those symptoms were in case any of the audience members have similar ones, but also how you discovered that it could be related to heavy metal toxicity.
Yeah. So what I was experiencing was, and even though I was working on my health as my full-time job, because I was a stay-at-home mom and just reading health articles and cooking healthy food and whatnot, but I was having trouble sleeping, which can be due to a lot of things, but can also be due to low estrogen levels. I was trying to go to bed early every night, but I kept having night waking and, just issues with sleep. And my libido was just non-existent, did not exist. And that was, frustrating. And I felt really tired a lot and just felt like with everything I was doing with my health, if I'd been doing that in my 20s, I would have just felt unbelievable. I'd have been super thin and I would have been like an Olympic athlete with all the exercise I was doing and trying to go into bed hungry and eating low carb and doing all these things that I was reading about in books and on the internet. And I just was not losing weight hardly at all. I was trying to lose the baby weight. I'd had a baby a couple years prior and just was not losing weight. I was having mood swings. I was having depression. I just felt like this low, mild depression, even though I had an amazing life and everything to be happy about. And I also felt like I was having bouts of anger, which weren't like me at all. And I was starting to have worse PMS. Like I usually have just, breeze through my period, but I was having pretty bad PMS and brain fog, a lot of brain fog, and just felt like I was reading all this health stuff and I couldn't remember it, which was really, really frustrating. I couldn't recall certain facts that I just read the day before. And then I went to the doctor and just found out I had the low thyroid function. I had adrenal fatigue. I had very low cortisol, aldosterone production, stress hormones. I also, which is a sign of adrenal fatigue. And then I had the low sex hormones, low estrogen, low testosterone, low progesterone. So I was just not happy to hear that at 37. Nor was I happy to hear about the solution that my functional medical doctor had was say, hey, let's just put you on some estrogen and put you on this progesterone cream and put you on some testosterone cream you put on your vulva and let's do some thyroid medication, even though it's natural. And I just thought, well, that's not how I envisioned my life at 37, going on hormone replacement therapy. Isn't that for menopausal women? And so I went on Dr. Google and just started, I wanted to figure out what caused my hormones to be so low and what can I do to then reverse that? Because I'm not that person that's just going to just do what my doctor says. Not going to happen. I'm like, why? Why do I need to do that? What alternatives are there? What else can I do natural? What are the side effects of those medications? What do the studies show? So I went on the internet and answered those questions, and I kept hitting upon pesticides mimicking hormones, preservatives and beauty products mimicking hormones, plastics mimicking hormones, heavy metals interfering in hormones and hormone production and hormone conversion. So I thought, well, this is, everything in our environment pretty much that everyone's putting on their skin and eating out of plastic and eating pesticides and heavy metals in the air, food, and water. I mean, this is the problem. So I just started, slowly detoxing my body, removing, doing metals testing and removing metals and cleaning up my home environment as much as I could. And my health and my thyroid, my hormones, stabilized over time. Doesn't happen overnight.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I always like to ask just to get a sense of when you started focusing on obviously reducing toxin exposure and also some of the detox protocols, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit. I know there's no specific timeline because with these things, you kind of gradually feel better. And it's kind of like one day you kind of look back and you're like, wow, I'm doing a lot better than I was before. But for the listeners who are kind of curious about the timeline, could you give us just a general sense of from start to when you started to actually feel the difference?
Well, really within a month. I mean, because I did what's called a hair mineral analysis or an HTMA. And I realized I was really low in magnesium, really low in zinc, really low in selenium. and probably trace minerals, which most people are. And I started taking those, and I started feeling a lot better within a very short period of time, because most people are mineral deficient. You need minerals to run your body and do all these different enzymatic processes that help to make our hormones and do a lot of other things as well. So I started feeling better pretty quickly. But the detoxification part, minerals are important in detoxification. They push metals out of our body. But when you first start mineralizing, you're really just repleting minerals, replacing things that you're missing. And that goes a long way to laying that foundation to then remove metals. Your body has to be working correctly to be able to detox, So, but as far as the heavy metal detoxification aspect, I started doing like liver cleansing, coffee enemas. I started feeling better very, very quickly because your liver metabolizes excess estrogen. And if the liver isn't working properly because your diet sucks, or you're eating too much carbs or too much fat or whatever, or it's dealing with too many toxins and it's not working correctly, that's going to interfere in hormones. So that helped me feel better pretty quickly. Infrared saunas help you to sweat out lots of pesticides and other chemicals and metals that are causing issues. So I felt really good doing those, but it probably took about a year doing a lot of these things before I really felt a lot better, to where I really looked back and said, God, I feel so much better than I did a year ago. But I started feeling better when I started a lot of these things fairly quickly. I really felt like it was moving the needle for me. Mm-hmm. And then you also have to take, binders and, substances that absorb toxins out of your gut and bloodstream. And then you have to take natural chelators, substances, herbs, maybe like cilantro and other things that help to grab metals out of your tissues to then remove them. And so you don't always feel amazing during that process. So you kind of have to go at the piece that works for you, helps to work with a practitioner to kind of, sidestep any roadblocks that you may have with detoxification or supplements or protocols that people do. But after about a year, I was really feeling a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can think of so many questions that I want to ask you, but I suppose a good place to start is, we hear a lot about toxins, and they probably they're all under the same umbrella, essentially. But what we've talked about so far, we've got the chemicals, we've got the xenoestrogens, we've got all of these chemicals that are mimicking estrogen and, in the body and disrupting our hormones. But then we also have, heavy metal exposure. So, and then mineral imbalances and things like that. And the question I have for you is, where does it come from? How prevalent is it, in terms of heavy metal toxicity?
Yes. Yeah. So everyone has heavy metals in their body. Everyone has chemicals in their body. The World Health Organization estimates we have between 500 to 700 chemicals on average in our bodies, every person. They do a study about every 5 years to detect these levels and keep a watch on what's going on with toxins in our environment. And then everyone has heavy metals. Metals are in our air, food, and water. Things like lead, mercury, arsenic, and there's dozens of them. And so the question is not, do you have heavy metals? It's which ones do you have and how much of them do you have? And so there's and speaking in regards to metals that affect our hormones, there's different metals that inhibit what are called hydroxylase enzymes. And these interfere in making hormones and like converting hormones from DHEA to testosterone or estrogen into other types of estrogen. So metals will poison these enzymes that make that happen and thereby reduce sex hormone production, like our estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. But there's also chemicals like organophosphates, pesticides, insecticides, herbicides like glyphosate, which is sprayed on a lot of, non-organic produce, especially wheat. And those interfere in our hormones. They mimic estrogens and they interfere in other ways in our body. But, they kind of will fill up all the receptor sites in our body for estrogen. signaling to our body, hey, we don't need as much estrogen. We've got plenty of estrogen filling up all these receptor sites. So reduce the production of that. But they also flood our body with these xenoestrogens, these fake estrogens that wreak hormonal havoc in our system. And then we have plastics in our environment that have plastic hardeners like BPA and BPS and other things. And so, I mean, it's just everywhere. Even if you're buying organic food, it's usually packaged in some plastics, and people are drinking bottled water out of plastic. It's very, very difficult to avoid. And then we have phthalates, which sounds weird, but it's a substance in beauty products and cleaning products that typically have fragrance in them, synthetic petroleum-based fragrances, that the phthalates keep the scent in your laundry detergent. And so the scent that's in your laundry detergent, the phthalates keep the scent in your clothes or your sheets. So they smell really nice for a month or however long. That's why they smell so good. Because when you wear perfume, it wears off in a few hours, because there's, typically no phthalates trying to keep that scent on you. But phthalates are also, say, in shampoos. So the smell stays in your hair for a long time, for instance. And then there's also preservatives in our beauty products called parabens, methylparaben, propylparaben, isoparaben, and isopropylparaben. And so that helps to preserve the product. So those also interfere in estrogen. So yeah, you really have to kind of have an education on what kind of ingredients to avoid that are going to interfere in your hormones. I have lots of information on myersdetox.com about this, about recommended products. And then there's, of course, emotional toxins, stress, work, family, emotional trauma, things like that can also interfere in hormone production as well. But that's, as far as the metals and chemicals, that's really what interferes in our hormones. I can get specifically into specific metals and which hormones that they interfere with if you guys are interested.
Well, we are. I want to unpack some of what you talked about. So first of all, I appreciate you breaking down the different types of exposures. That was really helpful. And I know a lot of the listeners are going to appreciate that. And one of the questions I also want to ask you is, because there's categories. So there's the chemicals. So where are we getting the heavy metals? I know, when we go outside and breathe air, there's some degree, obviously, of pollution, those types of things. But where else are we getting these heavy metals?
Yeah, so it might be helpful to go over each metal and talk about where we're getting that. So mercury, for instance, is what everyone kind of knows about. We're getting this in the air that we breathe, because when we burn coal, which we burn for fuel in the United States and in manufacturing, that releases mercury and cadmium and other metals into the air. That gets into our oceans, and then it precipitates into the food chain, into the fish. That's why fish have mercury. That in the air that we breathe has mercury in it. There's other reasons as well. Mercury is also in about 400 different medications, and that we get it that way. It's also
controversial.
Yes. Yeah. It's also not so much in vaccines anymore. I don't really worry about that exposure so much, but aluminum.
Well, they replace the mercury with aluminum.
The aluminum is really bad. It's really causing a lot of problems, but that's a whole other podcast. So mercury also is shellfish and a lot of things, and mercury amalgam fillings, of course. So we all had exposure to mercury. And so mercury interferes in progesterone. It increases estrogen, impairs ovulation, lowers thyroid function, causes a lot of problems in that regard with infertility. And then there's metals like lead. Everyone has lead. You cannot avoid lead because, they stopped putting it in gasoline in the United States, say I think it was like the 80s, I believe, or 90s. But it still was in paint. So about 30 to 50% of homes still have lead paint on the walls. Even though it's painted over, but you can still get this lead dust that you inhale or touch. And then all of the soil, unfortunately, where our food is grown, has lead in it. So even if you're eating organic food, it can still have lead. Even if you're eating organic grass-fed animal proteins, still has lead. So it doesn't matter if you're a vegetarian or vegan or carnivore, it doesn't matter. All of it has lead. Green supplements, greens powders, food-based supplements, they all can have lead in them because it's just everywhere in our environment because of this leaded gasoline that was released into the air from all of the car exhaust. And then there's in other countries, the majority of the countries around the world, still using leaded gasoline and still, doing manufacturing without scrubbing what's getting, released into the environment, and the weather patterns carry it to us, all over the world. So it's a very small world now. And so lead interferes in, a lot of different hormonal functions. It inhibits progesterone. And so it can impair prolactin, which can create irregular periods. It inhibits estrogen and inhibits testosterone. All these can lead to irregular periods and infertility. And then there's cadmium, which is found in pesticides. It's found in animal fodder. It's found in non-organic animal products and feed. And it's stored in the pituitary gland, and mercury is stored there also. It's the master gland that signals to your thyroid, adrenals, and ovaries. And so it really interferes in all of your hormonal actions in your body and signaling and feedback loop, telling your body when to produce it, when to release it, and how much. And, it can take a while to detox cadmium, but it's also, affects thyroid functioning and signaling and whatnot. It's also linked to low progesterone. And it's also found to be elevated in women with endometriosis, uterine fibroids. Those have had a lot of miscarriages because cadmium increases the number of natural killer immune cells, and that has to be low for a baby to grow. So a lot of women that have had recurrent miscarriages, cadmium can be a factor in that as well. And so then there's nickel. Nickel is in a lot of the fast foods, partially hydrogenated oils, and margarine, shortening, Crisco. Anywhere we have these hydrogenated fats, nickel is that catalyst that infuses the hydrogen into the fat to make it shelf stable. So it stays on the shelf for years and years and years without going bad. So delicious. But all of us have been eating that for decades, even if you've been eating well the past 5 or 10 years since you started, listening to podcasts and trying to get healthier. For decades, most of us ate Pop-Tarts and all that stuff with nickel in it. And so if you've had braces, dental work, that will have a lot of nickel in it. And nickel interferes in estrogen. It acts like an estrogen, creates an estrogen-dominant environment. It also lowers thyroid hormone production. And so so I kind of painted this picture of where we get this stuff and kind of how these metals interfere and act on our hormones in a negative way. But there's lots more examples I can give you, but I think you get the picture. These metals are in our air, food, and water, and everyone has been exposed.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is always this is one of those difficult conversations to have, because especially as women, either some of the women who are listening are actively pregnant right now. Some are trying to get pregnant. Some are not trying to get pregnant at all. And some have that kind of future horizon. I remember when I did my podcast episode with Dr. Joseph Pizzorno, I was able to interview him live because I caught him at a conference.
Yeah.
And his sessions were intense. And he wrote the textbook of natural medicine, right? So
yeah.
His research teams are impressive. And when he's doing his presentations, he's putting up, studies after studies after studies linking toxin exposure to specific illnesses. So illnesses that we think could be related to one thing, his research shows are highly correlated with the level of metal toxicity. And so essentially, we all have some degree of toxicity. We all have some degree of heavy metal exposure because we are part of the world. We're part of this environment. So in your case, when you were sharing about your own personal story, you had symptoms that didn't go away until you were able to start addressing it. This is kind of an impossible question to answer, but for some women, they can start cleaning up their diets and their xenoestrogen exposure. And so all of the different chemicals that you went through as a woman, all of the beauty products, everything that was ever made for you contains all of the chemicals, unless you're specifically sourcing beauty products, household cleaners that don't have it. So if you haven't made an intention to do that, they all have it. Everything is in there. So some women experience an improvement just by reducing their exposure, whereas others, so how would you know if this could be a problem for you? I mean, beyond just the fact that we're all exposed to some degree.
Yes, well, it's going to be a problem for you, whether you're currently experiencing symptoms or not, because everyone is different in their genetic makeup and their ability to handle these metals and detox them. Some people's, bodies are like Olympic detoxers, where they win the gold medal because just every part of their genetics and liver are working really well. Other people develop, allergies to metals and chemicals. And so one person can have the same amount of metals or chemicals than the next person, but the second person has a lot more symptomology or health issues or autoimmune disease because of their sensitivity to the toxin.
Just to make sure that I got that point. So basically two people could have the same level of toxicity. So they do a test and they have the same level of it. And one person could have all these symptoms and another person could basically not have symptoms.
Exactly. Yeah, because it's just everyone is different in how their body handles them, and then if you eat a really crappy diet, lots of sugar and refined grains and carbs, and then your liver is dealing with all that 911 and it can't get to the toxins. And then a lot of people, when they're younger, don't have a lot of toxins in them, but when women hit, 40, 50, 60, they've had a lot more time to bioaccumulate these toxins, and then they'll start showing symptoms. And so my caution to people is to not wait until they have a diagnosis. The facts are clear. We all have toxins in us, and they cause disease and symptoms, and they interfere in every single different metabolic function imaginable in our bodies. So it's just a matter of what your particular exposures are, your body's ability to handle them, and how you may express those symptoms based on your genetic weaknesses.
Well, so let's throw in the pregnancy card. Now, that's its own podcast, of course. Mm-hmm. But for example, when I was sitting there in that presentation with Dr. Joseph Pizzorno, and he's talking about all these toxins. So I don't remember his recommendation. So, this is not a verbatim thing, but I got the sense from his presentation and some of the specific kind of instructions that he gave. And from what I remember, basically his suggestion was that for every woman who's thinking about getting pregnancy, ideally detoxification is crucial and should be something that she's thinking of a year or two before she gets pregnant, meaning actively detoxify, because you can't detoxify when you're pregnant.
No, you can't.
Absolutely not. But actively kind of identify if there's any toxicities and actively detoxify a year out. So this is a hard conversation. As a culture, we're only starting to get that we should be doing preconception planning.
Yes.
Right? So even just as a culture, we're very slow to this idea that, wait a minute, I can't just hop off the pill and just get pregnant the second and everything, just assume everything's just going to be amazing. Although I always say, some women do come off the pill and get pregnant right away. But even though that happens, it's not necessarily the best situation. So, but from what you know and from your experience working with, clients over the years, what advice do you have for the women who are listening to this episode right now and are planning, for pregnancy at some point?
Yes. Well, just to start detoxing. I have lots of information on my website, and if people are curious, about their potential levels of heavy metals, they can go to heavymetalsquiz.com. And after they take that quiz, then they're kind of given the next steps. Here's the next thing that you need to do. That's, a big question, like where do I start? And so I've kind of built this out. It's like a video series and information to help people kind of figure out where do I start? What's the first thing that I do? But, it does take a year to make progress and make a big dent on the metals and chemicals that you have in your body. So if you are of childbearing age or you want to have a child, you want to be adding this. It's not just about, hey, let's start taking folic acid, or folate, preferably not folic acid, but that's what the doctors say. But it's not that simple. It's not just taking vitamins. You have to be thinking much larger than that, because, the research shows that, the toxins pass via the umbilical cord from mother to baby. They also pass through the breast milk. And I recommend women that are pregnant, they can still take binders. They can take things like modified citrus pectin. You can take that when you're pregnant and breastfeeding. It's just, made from citrus peels. It's totally safe. And it just absorbs a lot of toxins to prevent transfer to the child. But that's pretty much the only thing that you can do, when you're pregnant or breastfeeding. But as far as detoxification, you got to be thinking about, there's so much research out there. I love Dr. Lindsay Berkson. She's written books on this about, all the toxins that are shown in the research to transfer from mother to child. So it's just, you're going to have a healthier baby if you prevent toxin transfer. And so that happens if women have a lot of mercury fillings. There's a correlation between number of mercury fillings and autism rates of children. We all pass the lead in our bones to our children because our children's skeletal system is made from our bones. And so there's just a lot of different things that are transferred to the child. Not only that, but, because these metals and toxins interfere in our hormones, we're having much higher incidence of children that have hormonal issues, that have, issues with being, their genitalia aren't developed properly or fully. And it's because of the hormones, the toxins we're exposed to in utero. There's just a lot of different issues that can happen around, chemicals and toxins that we can get into and how it affects pregnancy. So it's just really important to be, not only if you're thinking about pregnancy, but just want to be healthy, want to prevent disease, want to improve symptoms of brain fog and fatigue and other issues that people have. People need to start making that connection to what metals and toxins are contributing to this symptom or diagnosis. Because I'm just amazed in the research I've done over the last decade. The more and more I read and research and interview the world's experts on toxins, every symptom, every diagnosis, there's some metal or chemical that's either directly or indirectly contributing to that symptom or diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because when you get into the research about toxins, it changes how you look at illness because you see that illness it's connected to these different factors. But this conversation itself is really scary because, for instance, a lot of the women that I work with, I mean, if you're going to kind of, give up birth control pills and start charting your cycles and monitor your cervical mucus and take your temperature every day, it's a certain kind of personality that's going to do something like that. And it's often, I work with a lot of women who are really kind of type A, right? And wanting to do everything right, wanting to check all the boxes, wanting to get an A on the test, metaphorically speaking. But with toxin exposure, it's hard because it's not like that. You can do everything perfectly. You can do all of the coffee enemas and the infrared saunas and we're still going to have some level of toxicity in our body. So to make it very kind of actionable, I know one of the things that I've spoken about when I talk about xenoestrogens and pesticide exposure and all of those things is, in my experience, step one is to stop bombarding your body, right?
Yes.
Before you even get to the specific protocols, if you identify that you have a cadmium or a mercury or an aluminum, issue specifically, before you even get there, there's a lot that we can do. And it's nice to kind of come out of this conversation with some hope and some actionable steps because it's a really, really big topic. And I feel like the science, we're just starting to understand how big of a problem this is, right? But what are some of those kind of practical ways that we can get started? Because I know that there are things that people can do today just to lessen the exposure, especially for the listeners of the podcast who might be relatively new to the show. And this is still kind of like a relatively new realm for them. And they still have the Glade plugins and the scented laundry detergent and all the things in their house. So let's talk about some of those practical steps.
Yes. So, and I don't mean to sound like a Debbie Downer on the show and whatnot, because this
topic is always in the
it's depressing to a certain degree, but there's a lot that you can do. This is just the reality of modern life. You can't change the air you breathe. There's a lot of things you can control, and you just control what you can. And Rome wasn't built in a day. You have to go through one thing at a time and learn about, hey, how can I improve my kitchen and make it less toxic? How can I improve my makeup and make, like, the next time you buy, make a better choice? And so the number one thing you can do is avoid everything that has the word fragrance in it. That's the easiest thing that you can do, because anything that has fragrance in it that can have dozens of different toxins that manufacturers don't have to disclose on the label because it's their proprietary formula. So guaranteed that's going to either be a petroleum-based, hormone-interfering ingredient or worse. And so that goes a long way to eradicating all the department store beauty, anti-aging serums, and the detergents from the conventional manufacturers. And even a lot of the companies that claim to be natural products still have fragrance in them. So they're not so natural. So you want to buy products that have essential oils in them, because any manufacturer that is thinking about you, thinking about the consumer, and your health, is going to put essential oils for a scent. And any manufacturer doing that is going to proudly boast that on the label. So that's what you want to be looking for. And so that's the easy thing to do. And also not to get stressed out about it. It's very easy to get fanatical and type A. And I was certainly like that in the beginning, getting very worried about every little thing. But for me, I've just learned to relax. There's only so much I can control. And it's just about doing a sensible detoxification program, which you can learn all about if you take heavymetalsquiz.com, step by step to removing toxins out of your body. But the other thing you want to be thinking about also is not just taking your makeup bag and just throwing everything away. You can certainly do that if you want. But, I don't know about you, but when I started looking into that, I was like, God, I spent thousands of dollars on my makeup, and so I was hesitant to throw stuff away. But you can certainly do that, but it's really more about the next time you buy, make a better choice. There's so many amazing brands out there, not only making safe products, but products that actually perform and work and have the texture and, work in the way that we want. That's why a lot of people buy toxic products, is because the shampoo suds up really amazingly, or the foundation has silica in it, silicone, and it just feels really amazing on our skin or whatnot. But these are like illusions. There's toxins you're putting on your body to get those benefits. So lots of companies now, really doing amazing work with chemistry and making, really well-performing products. I have a list of products on my website called Wendy's Favorite Natural Beauty Products, where I just list all my favorite brands and specific products, just because a lot of people don't want to do that research. They're just like, what do I buy? What works? And I understand that. So I've created a list in every category, shampoo, conditioner, moisturizer, whatever, and also, your cleaning products, you can use natural ones. Like I just use, vinegar and water. I also use baking soda. I use borax. I just, use natural things. I use essential oils, water, borax, essential oil, and it's really better and cheaper than any of these natural products. But if you want to buy natural products, there's lots of amazing ones out on the market these days. They tend to be pretty pricey, but they are out there if you want to make those choices. So, and other things are to think about your water. Water is a big source of toxin intake. And it's, even if you're on well water has its whole host of problems. But, with drinking water, a lot of people are drinking water out of plastic bottles. And, we really want to not be doing that. You want to get it out of glass water or glass bottles, or get a water filter. And, the filter has to be correct, or it's just not really going to filter out a lot of toxins. There's a little bit of a mini education people kind of need to have with each kind of area that they're looking to address in their home. That's why I say Rome wasn't built in a day. You just focus on the lowest hanging fruit. Focus on what is it that I need to do first, or I know is a big issue that I need to work on, and just research that and read about that, do a podcast, listen to a podcast on that, and make a better choice. And then over a few years, you have addressed all this stuff and are living a much healthier lifestyle. That's what I had to do. But I've, researched all this stuff. I researched the water filters. I researched all these things for you, and everything you can think about regarding avoiding toxins and body detoxification is on MyersDetox.com.
Well, I appreciate you putting that together because I know when I talk about these things, I get a lot of questions about brands. First of all, I'm in Canada, so some of the brands that I are my favorite wouldn't necessarily be available to my listeners kind of throughout the world.
Yeah.
But I appreciate what you said because real talk here, this is a project. This is not you could try to go all type A and try to fix it all even in a month, but that's unrealistic. If you really attack all of it. And there's layers to this. So you can start with the beauty products and then go to the cleaning products, but then if you really want to get into it, it's kind of like, how deep do you want to get into it? Do you know that your carpet's off gas? Do you know that your mattress off gases? Do you know, like, you could really take this quite far.
Oh yeah.
But I suppose the good news is that by doing these things, and especially for the women who are listening who are actively charting their menstrual cycles, in my position with the cycles, it's so great because you can actually see how these changes can have a tangible impact on your cycles. And, Wendy, you mentioned that you had PMS symptoms that were kind of out of control. Once you started addressing these, they improved. And so in addition to the actual physical chart and your observations, when you're paying attention to how you're feeling at different stages of your cycle, at least, with the combination of these two things, for women, it gives you a way to track your progress. So not every woman is going to notice like this amazing dramatic change, but some people do just by spending a couple of months cleaning up all of this stuff in their house.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's important also to talk about that, the changes that people feel when they detox their home or detox their body or what have you. For some people, like you said, it's like lightning striking. They feel a lot of change, but some people are more in touch with their bodies. Some people are more sensitive than other people. And so some people might make changes and they don't feel things. And that can be because when you start detoxing or you mineralizing your body, the changes are very subtle and can be very, very slow. But over the course of a year of making these changes, if you've, done a baseline, intake of all your symptoms and all your issues and whatnot, and been very careful to look at that, then a year later do that same inventory, and you may not notice the slow changes over time, but once you do that inventory at a year, you'll be like, oh, I don't have that symptom anymore. Oh, all my canker sores disappear. Oh, my lips stopped peeling. Oh, I don't have floaters in my eyes anymore. Oh, I'm sleeping a lot better. I'm not waking up 3 times. Might be once now or what have you. There's all these little things that start improving that you just kind of don't notice because it just disappeared. And so that was certainly the case for me. My lips were peeling constantly. It was just, what is this? I thought, I have dry lips. But, 6 months into detoxing, it's just stopped happening. But I didn't notice it for a few months because it just wasn't on my radar anymore. So people can get just a little bit of increase in mood, a little bit of improvement in their energy, a little bit of improvement in sleep, or they're getting more restorative sleep, or they're just subtle things that happen when you're detoxing or improving your health generally that you really have to be paying close attention to monitor that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm thinking, because we talked about, pregnancy, and there's obviously a limited amount of active things you can do, but having a sense of all of the different places that you could be having chemical and toxin exposure, it means that there are things that you can do. And I think, for me, when I had my first son, it like immediately, all of a sudden, I'm going to buy him different laundry detergent and I'm going to do this stuff. And it's interesting because we think about that for the baby, but we don't think about that for ourselves. So for the women who are listening, who are now sufficiently terrified of the lead in their bones, as they look down at their pregnant bellies, I think it's really important to think about this in increments and what we can do. And the impact that lifting the toxic burden, so without doing anything to your body necessarily, but actually just lifting the toxic burden, the positive impact that can have on your hormones and your pregnancy and your baby, your future baby, and the things like that can't be, understated. But let's talk a little bit about women who aren't in the pregnancy stage, right? Who have the option of kind of going further. So I'd like to hear a little bit so let me just give you a scenario. Someone's listening to this podcast, they get super into this detoxification possibly because they actually have some health concerns. Maybe they've had some fatigue or some issues that are just not going away, and they have that intuitive sense that, I think there's more going on here. So after they've kind of gone through and, taken their house apart and done all the things, they're still having some of those symptoms. So could you talk to us a little bit about, this, it would be a next stage of this detoxification process where you're actually going in, doing testing, as you mentioned, identifying things, and actually actively, going about that with the practitioner. So maybe you could share with us a little bit about kind of the next level of this detoxification.
Yeah. So if you want to work on detoxing your body, the best thing to do is to do a heavy metals test and just kind of figure out where you are on the spectrum, what metals you have, how much you have of them. So you can take targeted supplements to remove the specific metals that you have. Some women are very, very high in very concerning metals, like cadmium causes a lot of cancers and things like that. Some people are extremely high in lead. And so there's specific supplements we need to take to bring those levels down. So it's great to do testing, and so you know what you need to do next. So I start people with a hair mineral analysis, and that's a great way. It's a very good screening tool to discover what metals you have. But we also do urine and stool metals testing also. There's no perfect metals test. There's no one test that tells you all the metals that you have. So I start people with a hair mineral analysis first, and then people can get that for $99 just to check it out. And then they can also, if they choose to, work with a practitioner to interpret it if they like, and to also make supplement recommendations and just general health recommendations. And we do that within my Myers Detox Protocol. We have programs where people do testing, work with a practitioner. I have a Myers Detox Protocol course for people that just maybe want to learn about detoxification in general before they commit to doing more. But you can also, there's supplements that you can take where you can start detoxing right away. I have one called Citra Cleanse, where it's a binder and minerals and toxin mobilizer all in one, very gentle and natural. That's a place some people can start if they want to just get started doing something right away to detox. So lots of different levels for every person, and meet people where they're at and what they want to do.
And as you were talking about it, I was thinking about, women at different stages. And so for women who are actively trying to conceive, if you are going this route, and I mean, if you're working with a practitioner, they're going to flat out tell you, if you're going this route, doing the hair and mineral analysis, it's not the time to be actively trying to get pregnant. It would be the time to actively be avoiding for a period of time to address this, because if you're actively working with somebody and taking specific things to mobilize toxins and get them out, that's not the time to be trying to conceive, although it can be really kind of tempting to think you can kind of do it all at once. But again, I would say, Wendy, a question for you would be, for someone who's listening who's concerned about it, what would be some of the symptoms or the signs that this could be an issue for you? So how would you know if, should I take this further? How do I know if I need to actually take these additional steps?
Well, fatigue is usually the first symptom that people have. They have fatigue, they have brain fog, maybe they have an autoimmune disease. Those are, autoimmune diseases are one of the fastest subset growing diseases on the world, because metals and chemicals are screwing up our immune system functioning and responsiveness. And so if you have any of that, you have thyroid malfunction, it's typically due to mercury and cadmium as well. And a lot of different symptoms can be due to heavy metals. It's just really, it's amazing how many different symptoms that there are. But what I encourage people to do is, if you kind of just don't feel like you used to, if you kind of just, that something's wrong in your body, intuitively that something's wrong and you can't really quite pinpoint what's going on. Or if you have any of the symptoms I mentioned, like you have hormone issues, you have low libido, you have mood swings, anxiety, depression, a lot of digestive issues, but more so like the fatigue and brain fog, those, all of the above are definitely caused by heavy metals very, very commonly. So I encourage people to heed your body's call. Don't wait. You want to be proactive in figuring out what's going on with you exactly. All the symptoms I mentioned can be caused by a lot of different things, but we know that heavy metals are big contributing factors to these symptoms. And when people do, work on removing these toxins from their body, they feel better. I mean, invariably, people start to feel better when they, go through a detoxification protocol.
Mm-hmm. Well, Wendy, you are a wealth of knowledge. I really appreciate you sharing with us just, what you've gathered, the wisdom that you've gathered over the years of delving into this topic. And I think anyone who works in the health field can see how crucial this is. And it's often overlooked, I think, because it's easier to just run to the store and buy supplements, than to look at all these factors. So, I mean, given everything that we've spoken about today, we covered a lot. What is kind of like the top takeaway that you want the listeners to leave with today?
Well, I want people to think of detoxification as a lifestyle, to not think of it as something that they do a month out of the year, or a 3-day juice cleanse, or a 10-day detox in a box, or whatnot. I want people to think of it as a lifestyle and something that they commit to. Because even if you do, say, my Myers Detox Protocol, or do the course, or do testing and take some detox supplements, you can make a big dent in your body burden of toxins. But because we're exposed every day in the air, food, and water to toxins and chemicals, and it's just a reality of modern life, you want to be thinking about, something that you're doing to detox on a daily basis, whether that's taking supplements, whether that's liver cleansing, whether that's an infrared sauna. I want people to really be thinking on a daily basis of adding detox to their already healthy regimen, just like they do diet or supplements or exercise, because detox has to be a part of the picture. Dr. Joe Pizzorno, he said that the number one primary driver of disease today are toxins. So diabetes, it's toxins, it's not diet so much. Our obesity epidemic, it's the toxins and chemicals in the food. It's not calories as much. It's certainly part of the problem, but our obesity epidemic is due a lot in part to toxins, and our body using fat cells as a storage receptacle for toxins. So resistant weight loss and problems losing weight, toxins are a big factor in that. So I can keep going in that regard, but people need to be thinking about detox as a lifestyle if they want to be healthy and medication-free and disease-free and live a high quality of life going into their elderly years.
Mm-hmm. It's such an important message, and I couldn't agree with you more. Well, Wendy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
This has been awesome. So tell the listeners once again, where can they go to listen to your podcast, to learn more about your programs, grab the book?
Yes. Yeah. So on MyersDetox.com, I have 300 podcasts almost, tons of free information. I have 300 articles, and I have a book called Limitless Energy on Amazon, where I talk about heavy metals that interfere in energy production specifically. But people can also take my quiz. I encourage people to start there at heavymetalsquiz.com. So that kind of takes you through the next steps if you want to start detoxing your body.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Wendy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/267. I hope that you enjoyed my interview with Wendy. It was such a treat to have the opportunity to talk with her, and especially to dive deeply into the world of toxin exposure. I remember Wendy from even before I started my podcast about 5 years ago. She has been similar to me, just continuing spreading her message consistently throughout this whole time. So Wendy has, tons of great information if you are interested to delve into the world of toxin exposure, detoxification, and the positive impacts it can have on your health, in her podcast, and if you follow her on social. So lots of great information there. So thanks again, Wendy, for coming on the show. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, charting your cycles and paying attention to what's happening through the incredible world of charting and paying attention to your fertile signs is one of the ways that you can actually keep track and monitor your progress as you embark on a path of just improving your health and looking at these types of exposures, looking for ways to improve your hormonal health and just to support your body's natural hormone production. Essentially, by removing toxins, what you're doing is you're just supporting your body to do what it intended to do in the first place. And so I've cultivated a number of excellent resources for you to support you on your journey to discover your cycles and to really deepen that connection between your understanding of your menstrual cycle, your overall health, and how it relates to your hormones and your fertility. And so you can head over to fertilityfriday.com/mastery for details about my Fertility Awareness Mastery online self-study program. My book, The Fifth Vital Sign, is available on Amazon in paperback, ebook, and audiobook formats. And I look forward to connecting with you. I'll open a post in the Fertility Friday Facebook community, fertilityfriday.com/community, where we will be talking about toxins and talking about the different ways that you have, done your own detoxification, whether that is reducing your exposure to certain products or whether you've actually actively done some things to detoxify, or if you've done some testing to determine if you are in fact rating high for certain nutrients that you should not be, or low for that matter in nutrients that you shouldn't be. We'll be talking about this and really following up from last week's and this week's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/community in our Facebook community. And so I just want to thank you for spending some time with me today, for tuning into the podcast, for supporting the show. If you know someone who you feel would really benefit from listening to today's episode, then make sure to spread the word. The link to today's episode to the show notes page is fertilityfriday.com/267. And with that, I hope that you have a wonderful weekend. Whenever you're listening to the show, I hope you're enjoying your summer. I hope your summer warm, and I hope that you're just having a great day whenever you are listening to this episode. So thank you again. And of course, as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.